Well, I'm honored to be here, and in the moment I get the chance to interview some amazing men from our church, and I am the Crosstown campus pastor. Super excited to be joining in. I told them to cheer louder for me, but they didn't, they didn't come all the way from Minnetonka, but we're glad some are here. But I'm thrilled that I get to interview two men from our church, and they have an amazing story. You maybe have seen them on the promotions, but the first led the Minnesota Gophers to their best season in 80 years, 11-2, winners of the Outback Bowl, and is a part of our campus. Super excited to have him. And the other, also a Gopher as well, Super Bowl champion as well with the Indianapolis Colts. Would you help me welcome Tanner Morgan and Ben Utecht to the stage today? Well, we want to just take a few moments to chat a little bit about their time living out their faith, and they're both amazing men, do amazing ministry. You speak a lot as well, and I'm glad that you're a part of our church as well and get to share with the men today. It's a packed room, and I'm just super expectant. Did you think when you were in, growing up in football, you're, in second grade, third grade, were you like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be on the big stages. I'm going to be the quarterback at Huntington Bank Stadium? Or were you like, I'm just happy to be on the team?
No. I thought I'd be in Kentucky still, but Minnesota works and the Big Ten's just fine. Yeah. But no, I was always a short kid, and I had the dreams of playing big-time college football. And, honestly, I wasn't going to go to Minnesota until the day before I left. I was originally going to go to Western Michigan, and totally by the hand of God, PJ Fleck took the job at Minnesota and called me and was like, you want to come? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And I still live here, met my wife here, and just look back and it's like, man, that was totally God, almost 10 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I have a similar story to Tanner's. Never expected it. Grew up in a small river town in Hastings, just south of St. Paul. And we had an option running high school offense, so I maybe caught 12 passes a year, right? And so I got an invite to go to the Gopher summer football camp. And it was at the camp that I performed, so well that Glenn Mason offered me a scholarship at the end of the camp, like out of the blue. No way of knowing that was going to happen, right? So it was totally same with you, Tanner. It was totally God, and it wouldn't have happened without that camp opportunity.
Now, you're both offensive players. If you were to play defense, what position would you want to play?
I couldn't play one. I would have been a long snapper.
It's just a hypothetical.
I think that's the only thing I could have done. It was long snap.
You'd still be playing in the league if you were a long snapper.
Hot take, right? Though. Long snapping is a great play. If you can get in a long snapping and you're athletic at all, you can play a long time in the NFL.
100%.
A long time.
100%.
But I would have liked to play like strong safety, direct the defense, get in, make a couple tackles. But I played strong safety for like a half in 7th grade, and it didn't go well. So there's a reason I played quarterback. I think it was the only thing I could have done.
I played strong safety 1 year. That's all I have to say. 1 year.
Yeah, you got to like hitting people in that position for sure. I would have been a defensive end, 100%, yeah.
That's awesome. Now, you might have noticed some jewelry on Ben's hand. And, you're rocking it, and you got the Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, so blessed.
I don't have one of those. But you played with Peyton Manning.
Yes.
And, I feel like a lot, you hear him say all the time, Omaha. What does Omaha mean?
True.
Like, is that a thing, or is it just to distract people?
No, it's a thing, man. It's a thing. Arguably the most intricate NFL offense in history. And every single pass play, every single route, every single run had at least 3 or 4 different audible words and different hand signals that you had to learn, because if the defense caught on to one, you'd have to go to the next or to the next. And so Omaha was a run audible play, because he would deliver everything at the line of scrimmage, right? And the snap always happened with seconds left on the play clock. And the defense would always be shifting with 2-3 seconds left on the play clock. And so in a run situation where we were running an outside zone run play on the right, and they shifted last second, and he wanted to switch that to an inside zone run on the left, he could say Omaha, which told us it's on 2, said hut, and it would go from an outside zone on the right to an inside zone on the left. Or an inside zone on the right, on the left to an outside zone on the right.
You guys tracking with that? Yeah.
Man.
That is something that I never knew. I've had the chance to be at a couple chapels of different NFL teams, and just seeing the playbooks, like the playbooks get more complicated every level you go. And I remember, I was trying to remember a few plays in 7th grade, but it gets really complicated. Being a quarterback, you had to remember a lot of plays. When you played, did you have the microphone or did you not?
My very short shot of espresso in the NFL, we did. But in college, no, that's a recent thing. But I think it goes back to those play calls, they all tell a story. We're here for a reason. Our lives are to tell a story about Jesus, but the play call tells a story. It tells the formation, the play, and it tells you the alignment, assignment technique. And it's really like a calling for what receiver on what you're supposed to do. And then there's an audible if you face, if we get this coverage versus that coverage, we're going to change it and check it. But it turns out to a long thing that you have to be able to react on the fly. It's not that much different than our spiritual lives, being able to walk in step with the Spirit if we get into Galatians. And if you can walk in step, you know when to make the call. Just like if I'm the quarterback and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, if I don't spend time in the playbook, I'm not going to know the check. But if I spend time with the Lord, I'll know when I need to pivot, when I need to maneuver, and what the right next step is.
Come on. It's so true. And I think sometimes we as men, when we're asked to lead, at times we feel inadequate. And there's times where you have to step up and lead. When you're the quarterback, you have to step up and lead. In the same way in our own lives, you have to step up and lead. What did you learn about in leadership, and how is that transition into your faith and in the way you lead yourself and the way you lead in business? I think that a lot of us, we think about sports and it's the highest level. The goal is to succeed, but it does translate. And I actually have found, and maybe you could say this is true as well, there's a lot of people of faith in the highest level of sports because the level of pressure that you're under is high. Talk about how that's translated for you in leading at the highest level, but also you have to lead yourself every single day.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that, one of the biggest differentiators is the power of practice. And it's so biblical, you guys, right? Matthew 7 says, "He who listens to my words and puts them into practice is like a man who builds his house on the rock. The winds blow, the rains fall, but the house stands. He who listens to my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who builds his house on sand. And the winds blow and the rains fall and the house crumbles," right? Everything about professional sports is the culmination of practice, right? So NFL data tells us that for every 280 hours of practice, an NFL player plays for 1 hour. Think about that. When you break that down into a game on average has between 65 and 75 plays. Every play lasts about 5.5 seconds, right? So if you're a starter and you never leave the field, you play on average between 9 and 11 minutes on an NFL Sunday. But you practice for 16 hours a week to play 9 to 11 minutes. Guys, think about that and how it relates to our faith. Right? The only difference between the sheep and the goats is what they did and didn't do, right? Yep. As men, being called to practice what we believe is how we actually go out and change the world.
That's awesome. That might be why my golf game is not very good.
Probably.
Tanner, one of the things that I think is so interesting about sports is you can see that there are moments when players and teammates disagree or coaches disagree. And I think in life, those agreements or disagreements happen, but they're not in front of 1 million people on television. Yeah. Talk about how you dealt with that as someone who's a person of faith, but you dealt with times where you disagree with what the coach said, or you disagree with what a teammate did, or maybe you're having a tough week with somebody, but you still have to go out there and play together, and you have a goal together. Talk about how you dealt with conflict and how you helped to resolve that as a leader on the team.
Yeah, I think, first of all, there's a lot of conflicts. Most of them happen behind closed doors. And so the way that you handle those tends to be the way that you handle them on the field and how you respect each other. You might have, I think of the Jeff Saturday, Peyton Manning, confrontation, right? Google it later. It's a good one. But they get over it in maybe 30, 35 seconds. But I think for me, as a leader on the team, people are going to watch how you handle things. And there was a lot of times where I'm like, this call sucks. I don't want to run this. We should run this play. But if
tight end seam
yeah,
down
there
the middle,
you go.
Right?
There you go, exactly. But if I walked into the huddle or my body language gave off that, like, I don't know why we're running this play, boys, immediately they're not going to play as hard. They're not going to practice as hard. And I'm putting blame on the coach instead of saying, like, hey, I really like this play. And it goes back to unity. Like, leadership from a coach and a player perspective, and no different than a church or a business. I might not agree with everything that my boss or that my leader says, but it's godly to walk in unity. It's godly for me to, hey, unless it's a sinful habit, but I can say, hey, I'm under, I want to honor you, and I'm going to walk in unity here, even though I don't necessarily absolutely believe in this decision, and usually it ends up working out, and you can have the conversation later the next day. And I think in sports that happens a lot because tensions are high, the pressure's high, you work all that time for how many minutes? Not many, would you say 9 to 11 in a game? So you want to maximize every opportunity. And so sometimes when you don't capitalize on a 3rd and 7 when you really need it, the tension's high, and that's when things kind of can go south. But the way that you can conflict resolve in those moments goes back to how you trained in the summer, in the fall, and the relationships that you've built.
Yeah, but Ben, anything to add on conflict?
Yeah, I would say, for me, it comes down to who do you trust? Like, who you really playing for? Right? One of my life verses is Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, do it with all of your heart as though working for who? The Lord. And not for who? Man. Right? And so when you get into those situations where you don't always agree with the calls that are being made or with the leadership styles that are being presented, because, fellas, there's an underbelly to the NFL, all right? Even being coached by Tony Dungy, right? There's an old school philosophy in coaching that is built around fear and breaking you down and building you back up. But the reality when it comes down to it for me was always, who am I playing for? Where is my trust in the situation? And as long as I'm giving everything that I have in all that I do for the Lord, he's got it taken care of.
How have you balanced between confidence and arrogance? I mean, obviously, at the time that you're getting recruited or you're on the big stage, is, I guess, before the big NIL deals, right? But that would have been nice. But
That would have been really nice.
You're like, name, image, likeness, the year I leave, right? But how do you balance that to where, there's people in this room, and maybe you're at the peak of your career, or maybe you're running a small business, or maybe you're getting started and you have big ambition, but you want to be confident. I heard, Scotty Scheffler, best golfer in the world, he says, my victory was paid for on the cross, but he's also wearing that green jacket, right? And so there's the tension of, I want to be confident of what I can do, but I don't want to be arrogant. I realize that I am doing this to the Lord. How did you balance that when you're continuing to make level after level?
Who or what do I worship? First and foremost, am I worshiping this sport, this gift that God's given me, or am I using this as a tool and opportunity to worship him? Is the field, my ministry? Is the locker room my ministry? Or is it a stadium to honor me and worship me? I think that's where it starts, right? And I think you guys have had this conversation on the Processing podcast about idols in sports many times, I think. And sports can definitely be an idol. But man, what an opportunity to bring people together and point them towards Jesus, point them towards Christ. And so for me, I used to always think of dub. So I would write on my wristbands a big W and then a little W. And the first one stands for I'm here to worship. And where that comes from is when I cross the line, this is a tool for me to worship. This is my ministry. This is my platform to bring honor to God. Now, if I'm here to worship, does that mean that I'm going to have self-doubt, that I'm going to think that I'm a terrible player and that I'm not a good human being because I didn't complete the 3rd and 7 sideline out to Rashad Bateman? No. I have to take that thought captive in the minute that it happens, right? And so, I honestly dealt more with the self-doubt piece of it. I'm not supposed to be here. And God would often remind me, yeah, you're not, but I have you here for a reason. But then, Coach Fleck used to always say this thing called the king of the twos, TOOS. And ironically, I was number 2. He was like, you're too short, you're too small, your arm's not good enough, but you're the perfect guy to lead this team. He's like, I was the same way as a player because the way that you carry yourself, your intangibles. And God would often remind me that, if you looked at me on paper, I shouldn't have been started 50 games in the Big Ten or ever signed with an NFL team, 6 foot, ran a 4.9 40, and didn't throw the ball very well. But somehow we managed to win games. And maybe some of you are in here yeah, you should have got benched a long time ago in your career. I don't know. That might be you. But I think that the second W comes back to win. Oftentimes we have this message that if you're a Christian athlete, you're there to worship and, just stay out of the way. But like, no, I'm here to run the race to win. I'm here to compete. Like, this is a gift that God's given me. And if I'm going to steward this gift, I'm going to give it everything that I have and give, 110%, whether that's on a Saturday or Monday through Sunday, working to be at my best to steward that gift.
Yeah, I would say in football, we talk a lot about the fundamentals and techniques of football. And typically, whenever you're going through, throughout the season and you begin struggling, whether it's as an individual player in your performance or whether it's as a team, the coaches always bring you back to the fundamentals and techniques because they lay the foundation, for your ultimate success. And so the question really is what are the fundamentals and techniques that you have in your life to hold you accountable, to practicing and preparing to live out your salvation? And so that was kind of a key because, you have to be confident in order to play at the highest level, right? And the difference between confidence and arrogance is where your identity is, right? Is your identity in the cross or is your identity in yourself, right? And the fundamentals and techniques for every single one of us as men in this room is the Word of God. And so when you even look at Jesus being tempted by Satan in the desert, what was he tempting him with? He was tempting him with the difference between confidence and arrogance. Where was Christ's confidence in that moment, right? And all of his tempting was to draw Christ towards himself. And he used the Word of God. He went back to the fundamentals and techniques of his Father in order to hold him accountable to living out the mission.
That's so good. I have a few more questions, but I want to go down this vein. There's a lot of men and parents in the room, and maybe they have kids that play sports. And they live in the tension between those who maybe their kid's really good at sports. My parents didn't have that problem. And they're like, we're going to pull you out really quick. But maybe they do live in the tension to they're really good at a certain sport and they're thinking about scholarships. They're thinking about potentially going to the pros. We know that it whittles down very quickly, but there are conversations about someone's getting recruited and it's earlier and earlier and it's, they're in third grade and we're starting to recruit them. How would you advise parents who don't want to stop their child's dream, but also they want them to grow up in the ways of the Lord? And how sad would it be if your child gets to the NFL or gets to the NBA or whatever it is, and they lose their faith? We don't want to gain the whole world and lose our soul. You obviously are standing here. It's possible to get to the highest level and to keep your faith. What allowed you to do that, and what would you give the advice to the fathers in the room who have kids that are in sports?
Okay. He's going to let the guy with 4 daughters start first. So there's a whole ministry there, guys, that we don't have time to talk about. That's why I'm so happy to be here right now. So thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I'm actually going through this right now. My oldest daughter, Alora, 16, is the top outside hitter in volleyball in the state. And so on June 15th is when they were able to start the recruiting process. And so she woke up on June 15th with about 60 text messages from schools across the country. And what has happened over the last week is, some pretty significant realizations of what it takes to play in the Power Four conferences. And it takes size and physicality. And she found herself in this position where with every one of these schools, she was in the third position to be offered. And what ended up happening at all of the schools that she was most interested in, they were choosing other people, okay? And so a lot of tears, a lot of emotions, really hard to watch, your child go through that. But I just remember feeling like the Holy Spirit was reminding me that the foundation to the scalability of the cross comes down to discipleship. And so for me as a parent, and I would encourage you as parents that have children in sports or in extracurricular activities that are very passionate, you want to see every opportunity through the lens of discipleship. Because whether it's through the joys that come out of winning or achievement, or whether it's in the valleys of loss and suffering, every single moment you have with that child in that moment is an opportunity to disciple them closer to their relationship with Christ. And so even though this last week hasn't been what we expected, we've had some of the most profound spiritual conversations because trust really and surrender has been kind of the key, testimony this last week with her. And so that discipleship is really key in those moments.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it comes down to the question of, does your behavior show them that church, the corporate gathering, is important? Yeah. Or does your behavior show them that just being a great athlete is important? I had a great family, but a lot of times my dad, he's in eternity now, but I could look back and his behavior was more about me as the quarterback and the athlete. But he was trying to provide an opportunity for me and do things that he never had the chance to do. And so I think it's so important coming from the parent, like, do you show them that their worth doesn't come from any of their accomplishments or anything that they do, whether that's sports or any activity, or does it come from who they are in Christ Jesus, right? Like the earlier that kids can get that, I think the better for the kingdom and the more that the devil shakes, right? And there's nothing scarier in a family than a man who lives on mission for the kingdom of God. But if you tell your kids that they're only valuable if they throw a touchdown on Friday night, or you yell at them because they didn't perform well, then what are they going to think their value's from? Like, what's their value system? Or does their value come from being found securely in Christ, knowing that God sent his son to die a death on a cross for them and being the substitution, for their sins? Like, do they understand that and grasp that? And I think it's really important now more than ever that we honor the corporate gathering, honor church, because the more you give youth sports, the more it'll take, period. The more you give sports in general, the more it's going to take. I mean, in college, I literally could not go to church during the season because we had meetings at 10 a.m. And so it's like, all right, I'm walking over to the facility at 8 o'clock, listening to church or watching it on my phone. And it's like, man, I wish I could just be at church right now. So it just goes back to that. Like, does your behavior actually show them that they're valued beyond their athletic ability, valued beyond whatever sport it may be?
Yeah, and it's not just checking a box, it's the why behind it, right? It's encouraging that. You talked throughout this about adversity, and we don't all know the level of adversity it's like to have, a 350-pound lineman chasing us down or pushing us aside, right? We don't all know that adversity. But every one of us has gone through things that feel like that in our lives. There's many people just before this lifting their hands saying, I'm struggling, I'm dealing with this. And we all carry things. And I think what's so unique about sports is the window is pretty short. You think about your entire life, the window at the top is very short. Even someone who lives a long life and a long career. I mean, you look at like Tom Brady was in the league for a long time. But I mean, most people in their normal jobs would not even be at the peak of their career yet and when it's retirement age for, the NFL or finishing up college football or you're waiting on your deal, whether it be injuries or whether it be I couldn't get to the next level or I didn't get the call because I was picked, someone else was picked. But maybe it's I applied for that job and I didn't get it and I really wanted it. Or I thought I was going to get the promotion. Or I thought that I was going to get married sooner. Or I thought that I was going to have children. Or whatever it is, you get hit with these realities that it wasn't the plan that you had in your life. Over your time in sports and even beyond that, as parents, going on into the next step of your careers, how have you dealt with those moments to where you really feel, I really can't control this, but I've been faced with this. How have you dealt with that adversity?
Man, it's been tough. It's been really challenging. At the end of the day, I've had to ask myself, where am I placing my expectations? Where do I place my expectations? And oftentimes when I hit the floor the hardest, it's because most of my desires have been selfish. And when the Lord has decided to, remove those from my life, it's when I've really, hit the floor. But always coming back to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, to trust in the Lord, and really for me, guys, most importantly, to not lean on my own understanding. Whenever we start to lean on our own understanding, we allow our expectations, to be misguided. And that really played out in my life. My biggest struggle throughout my career was injury. And my senior year, I went in to the Big Ten as the number 1 tight end in the country. I was up for the Mackey Award, which is the nation's top tight end award. I was preseason All-American. I was supposed to be a first-round draft pick. We're playing Wisconsin at the end of the year. I release on a corner route. I plant my foot to turn for the ball, and I hear and feel popping all across my lower abdomen. Pop, pop, pop. And then my legs stop working, and I fall to the turf. But I caught the ball. I mean, let's go.
Football guy.
Let's go. I caught the ball. And that was it. That was the end. That was the end of my career. And I found out that the NFL physicians all red flagged me as too much of a health risk. I went from being a potential first-round draft pick to not getting drafted at all. And I'm going up to my agent's office, holding back tears. I put all my eggs in the football basket. 2 months before that moment, I had a chance to speak at an alumni event at the University of Minnesota, and I get to open for Tony Dungy. And I get up in front of 700 alumni and say, hey, Coach, if you're truly a Gopher, you're going to draft me in the upcoming draft. If you really care about this university. And he was gracious enough to respond. He came to the podium and said, Ben, we know how talented you are. We'd love to have you, but we drafted Dallas Clark in the first round the year before, just an amazing tight end. And so we're not going to be looking at tight ends this year. Then he stepped away from the podium, put his hand on his chin as if he was being downloaded something, came back to the podium and said, Ben, I'm going to make a promise to you in front of all these people. If for some reason you slip through the cracks, for some reason you don't get drafted, I promise I'll be the first person to call. So fast forward 2 months, all that's left are the free agents, the guys that come in and give veterans a break. 5 seconds after the free agent market opens, the phone in the middle of my agent's desk rings, and I pick it up, and who do you think it was? Tony Dungy. And Hall of Fame general manager Bill Polian. They said, Ben, we didn't think this was going to happen. We know what your injury is. We've dealt with it before. We want you to be a Colt. We're going to send you to the top surgeon in the country. We don't even want you to play the first year. Just get better, and we'll pay you as though you're a playing rookie. Right? Don't lean on your own understanding, but place your trust in the Lord, because great are the plans I have for you. Plans not to harm you, but plans to prosper you. And so really that trust and really the focus on where my understanding is placed, and he's got everything taken care of.
That's amazing. Wow. That makes me, I didn't know that. Yeah. That makes me respect Tony even more. And you, of course. But I think, yeah. It's a bald head, but it's not Peyton Manning's forehead.
I've always wanted to do that.
Right?
It's not Peyton Manning's forehead.
To lock back in a little bit, I would say, like, in my career, I faced a ton of adversity. I went from, that 11-2 season to 3-4. COVID, my dad got cancer, and it's like, what the heck? I thought I was going to be one more year, be a second-round pick. Never imagined that, to now what's happening. My life is falling apart. And my faith was like, honestly, I was tested because my dad had a complete revival and, was really locking into the gifts of the Spirit and the move of the Spirit. And I was like, do I actually believe that my dad can be healed? And I saw it. He went from 6 months to 14 months. And, very grateful for that time that he had on this earth. And then the end of my career, again, going into my 6th year, it's supposed to be a great year. My old offense coordinator comes back, everything's great. And then I missed the last 4 games of my senior year because I had 2 concussions in a month. And again, I didn't even know if I wanted to continue to play football at all after that. But I would say, like, after the hardest thing for me, the transition, was when I got out of coaching. Because my whole career in football was like, Tanner, you're going to be a great coach. Like, I'll get you a job immediately. Do this. You can work for me, this guy, that guy. Like, you'll be phenomenal at this. I'm just like, well, that's what I'll do. I'll make a lot of money, get to stay passionate, and that'll be my influence. Like, sweet. And so when I got cut by the Steelers, I went to coaching, ended up with the Vikings for a little bit, went back to coaching. And I remember looking at PJ Fleck, turning down an offer that most people in my position would kill for in the coaching world. And it was like, are you sure? It was like, yeah. There was just a piece. I didn't know for sure what I was going to do next. I had no idea. I had a wife, a 1-year-old daughter at the time and didn't know what I was going to do for a job and how I was going to make money. And so that was a little scary. But what led into that for me, I think, is like, if I'm trying to walk in my calling, if I'm trying to figure that out and get clarity from it, then I have to, one, have a daily surrender to Christ. Galatians 2:20 is not even my life to live anymore. It's Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. Like, that's my life. That's my mission. It's not me. It's Christ who lives in and through me. And so if I'm trying to walk fully in a way not to please people, but to please man, not to please man, but to please God, then I have to spend time with the Lord every day. And the way that I was able to decipher what to say yes and what to say no to was through prayer and through my prayer language. Like, I didn't know what to pray, God. I have no idea. Should I take this job? Should I do that thing? I don't know. Well, good thing I have the Holy Spirit. Like, it works out. And so, yeah. But I think just like quickly to finish that loop, like, I realized that a lot of people had ideas of what I should do and ideas of what I still should be doing. But if it doesn't align with what God tells me or God shows me what I should be doing, then it's not what I'm supposed to do. If it doesn't align with what God says, then it's not for me, at least not yet. And that's where it comes down to, it might be the flashy object, it might look good, it might look like maybe it's more money, maybe it looks good on social media, or it's a promotion to other people, but if it's not what God has for me, then I don't want to do it, because then I'm acting in disobedience. And the only way I know how to do that is to walk by obedience and faith by the Son of God, and the way that I can decipher that is by spending time in prayer. And for me, like, I think tapping into my prayer language, speaking in tongues, and operating in the gifts of the Spirit is the only way that I know and have peace about what's a yes and what's a no. So I would just encourage you guys, like, this is an Assemblies of God church. If you don't have that, and I think 2 weeks ago there was an opportunity, like, man, if you want to live on mission, if you want to live on fire for God and live activated, pray for that. Like, there's people here who would love to lay hands on you and pray for you for that gift, because you will walk fully in who God has you to be, and who knows what will happen after it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I told him before, I said, are we going to do an altar call for speaking in tongues? And he's like, yes, apparently.
That's your job. You're the pastor. That's your job.
Well, we still got more service today, but you both have blessed us. Ben, you have books in the lobby, a new book that you have, and you're just a blessing to us. You're a blessing to our church. And as Pastor Josiah comes up, come on, can we thank them for being here, for sharing with us? It's amazing. Amazing.